All you had to do was let everybody know, and you had. So in terms of individuals, we're judged on competence, trustworthiness, and intent. And intent is judged by your intent to do right by the organization and your intent to do right by me. And since our last meeting, a perfect example of this came up. I don't know if you follow football, but Seahawks versus Cardinals. Tie game, 66-6, that's the way it ended. In the regular game, both kickers kicked two field goals over 40 yards. In the overtime, both kickers missed field goals under 30 yards. And so at the end of it, they asked the Cardinals coach, do you have any words for your kicker? And he said, this is not high school, this is professional. You gotta make it. They asked Pete Carroll, the coach of the Seahawks, the same question. Do you have any words for the kicker? Well, he made the kicks to get us in position, and he'll make a lot of kicks for us down the road. He's our guy. We love him. Can you imagine what impact those 2 points of view had on the rest of their teams? Who was more energized about the intent to do right by me? We talked about change, that we, as individuals, as human beings, we don't like change, and so there's natural resistance to change. And to overcome that resistance, there are 3 key components: a compelling vision, a level of dissatisfaction with the current situation, and trust in the leadership. Those 3 things in combination have to be sufficient to overcome the resistance to change. So now I want to talk about success. This was the piece that I delayed from last time, but I'm going to have you do it anyway. And it's unfair, but I'm going to ask you to do it anyway. And this is just for the 2 board members and the superintendent. I want you to write down 2 numbers. On the front of your packet are 2 squares, 2 sticky notes. On the green square, I want you to write down what percentage of your district students are currently succeeding. This is without discussion. On the orange square, what percentage of your district students should we expect to succeed? And I will collect them.
Orange was the expect.
Orange is expect, green is current.
Expect next year or just expect?
What they could be doing, if, in a perfect situation, what percentage of our students should we expect to succeed? So, having most of the expect group down here is not unusual. You didn't hear my normal spiel from last time. I set up expectation a lot, and so usually there's a lot of orange squares over here. This is what I want to point out here. There's a range here of current success. So one person wrote down 2 numbers here, 43 and 20. This is 40 and this is 75. I think it's clear that you're not using the same yardstick. And it probably comes from the fact that you're not having enough conversations about what student success, student achievement looks like and what it's happening in this district. If you recall from last session, I talked about high-performing boards, the national survey that found that they were spending 60% of their time, 65% of their time on student achievement, and only 11% of their time on the, what we call the killer bees, the books, bonds, budgets, buildings, and buses. Yet the national average is that those percentages are flipped. Most boards in the country spend 60% of their time on the bonds, budgets, buildings, buses, books, all that, and only 11% of their time on student achievement. So the problem here is in terms of community confidence. If I talk to this person and I hear, sadly, only 75% of our, or sadly, only 40% of our students are currently succeeding, and then I talk to this board member and I hear, well, we're doing better. We've got 75% of our kids that are succeeding. I have to wonder if you're going to the same meetings. So at some point there needs to be a discussion about truly what success looks like. In addition, how do you evaluate your superintendent if you don't know what success in the district looks like? Particularly if you're using very different yardsticks to measure that success. So the next, well, let me ask, it's not questions not answered, let me ask it. What would you use? What would guide your notion of what success looks like here? And this is just a beginning conversation, this is not the final thing, but it's meant to set the stage for when you get everybody together and have a full, more robust discussion. But
where are we at now as opposed to where we were at
yeah,
last year?
what is it that's going to guide your estimation of student success?
What was working good before?
Pardon?
You may not be doing the same thing. What was going good that they were more successful last year that we're not doing this year?
So that I'm not.
You're not following. Okay, if we're going down.
So previous.
You got to look at some place before you have to have a starting point, not just from day one.
And as a reminder, this comes with spell check. I'll need it.
Well, we have our SFA scores, we have our STAR scores, we have lots of scores. What was the new state test that they just rolled out last year?
CAS.
Now, hopefully, the state has been working 3 years on this very notion. How do we gauge success? And they've just started, they've just released their rubric. And so hopefully, some of this stuff will start to come into greater focus. But
I would think graduation rates could determine them, you know, passing rates within a class. What's your, you know, report card say?
actually, Risa, you bring up one of my favorites in terms of this. What percentage of students are at grade level? Because that's something that they determine every time there's a grading period, which they can report, teachers can report to Dr. Spears, and Dr. Spears can report that to you. It's not the only way to judge success, but it is one that can be looked at on a pretty ongoing basis.
Well, also, I mean, this is a you owe me world right now.
Pardon?
Their collective will, which you just talked about. What's in it for me? If you want me to succeed, what are you going to give me? Okay?
Actually, that was part of it.
Everybody will get it. You know, I mean, it's a give me too, right? Because you see a lot of kids graduating and shouldn't even been out of 8th grade.
That's one of the conversations that we had about community confidence, was how that feeds student motivation. What's in it for me? The idea that we never know from where each child is going to get that spark to do well. So we need everybody to support the value of learning, the value of education. Most parents have had the situation where their child has heard something from somebody else that they've said over and over again, but now because somebody else said it, it took on a new level of meaning. That's a phenomenon not unique to parents, it's also true of teachers. And teachers can talk about the importance of learning, but it may not resonate with all kids. And we never know. A shopkeeper, neighbor, anybody might be the person to give a child that motivational level, kind of frame it in a way that they understand what's in it for me to do this. Because you want every kid to walk in the classroom ready, eager, motivated to learn. I don't care how good you are as a teacher, if the kids are like this, go ahead, make me learn. That's a challenge. So, hopefully, I mean, I will be reporting this back to you when I'm done. So I'm hoping that you guys set the stage for a robust discussion with the other members.
Can you add the LCAP indicators?
Oh, sure.
I guess one of my questions would be is, are we not doing our job as a board? Is that why we're going through this training?
That's why you're being trained?
Yeah, going through this training, are we not doing our job as a board?
Well, that's not for me to say.
No, I brought this training to the district to get us all on the same page. So to make sure that we have new board members, and we have some board members that say that they haven't received training, and then as a team that we all have the same training. That's why it's called Good Beginnings. So it's to put us all on the same page with the training.
And we do these workshops with boards all over the state, and so it's not a unique thing. I wasn't called in here because the state said, shame on you.
And the other piece is that the conference is in San Francisco, and I don't know, we could take different trainings at the CSBA annual conference, but I'm not sure how many people want to travel to that to do those.
The other is that when you go to conferences and like the new board member institute and the big stuff, those are focused on individuals. This is the one piece that we have that's really meant to be a board level training workshop.
I have a question. Does the school pay you to come up here to train them?
Yes.
How much is it? Or, I mean, that's,
I'm going to work with the board this time.
okay.
So there's a piece in your packet called If We Truly Believed. Take a moment to read that, and then I'll have you share your...
Is it in bigger writing than this?
That's this right here.
Yeah,
Oh, this one.
it's
Oh, this one.
We ask that it be just board members in the discussion this time, but to answer your question, it's $2,000
Okay.
plus travel.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Hello? I just want to tell you, I put some chocolate soup on the stove, and I'll be home. I put some chocolate soup on the stove, and I'll be home on the 5. I'm on this board taking chocolate. That I have a fire going on the stove. Okay, I'll see you later. Bye.
Anything jump out at you?
I like the whole thing.
When it comes to just the term, if we truly believe, there's a lot of educators and people that do not believe this can be reached at all. You know, there are inner city schools, rural schools, that there are those children that just cannot and refuse to be helped, regardless of what you do.
It turns out that that's not necessarily true, in the sense that that has to stay that way. It can change. So there's a study in Alaska that I shared last time. They've been doing more than 30,000 surveys every year for 10 years. About half of them were students, half of them were adults. And it showed that as the level of expectation, the belief that kids can do well, and not only adults saying that they believe that, but students saying our adults are, letting us know that they believe that. That as those expectations increase, so did reading, writing, and math scores, to the point now where they can almost predict what the test scores are going to be based on the survey results. And Alaska is about as rural as they come, in the sense that there aren't many roads up there. You have to get everywhere by plane. And so really small, a lot of native villages and others. And so poverty is a huge issue. And in this state, Garden Grove, one of the largest districts in the state, among the urban districts, had the lowest graduation rate in the state. In 10 years, they went to having the best graduation rate in the state among all urban districts. And their poverty rate didn't change. The English language learner percentage didn't change. None of that changed. What changed was their belief that things could change, that kids could do better. And everybody bought into it. And it took them 10 years, but they got there. So we talked about that. So let's get into some of the nitty-gritty stuff. Oh, excuse me. Maybe it's just dust. I don't think I'm allergic to anything in the room. Excuse me. So the next thing in your packet are sample meeting norms. So when we're done with this session and I go back, I'm going to send you a memo with some of this stuff and some of the other stuff, as well as a draft governance handbook. And the draft handbook will have some potential norms and protocols for your review. So I would start with this list of norms and ask, does this work for you? Are there other norms that should be added to this list?
Looks good to me.
Anything you want to add? It's not your only opportunity. You'll have a chance to review it as a board. But, okay. So, one of my chief messages that I want to deliver today is not just what you do, but how you do it that matters. And again, you do have an impact on student achievement. I like this. I talked with a board chair president a number of years ago who said, nobody ever comes for a meeting, but my barber knows what's happened at every one of them. Because people talk. So people are always watching. And sometimes to exceptional results. I don't know if you can read that.
Go ahead.
So let's talk about board superintendent relations. One of the standard questions that I have in my phone calls is, do you have a superintendent evaluation process in place? And what I heard was, yes, it came with the search package. And my understanding is last week you started to use that process. So the only reason that I bring it up is because there's research that shows that how you go about evaluating a superintendent on student learning goals, not necessarily how well the football team is doing or those kinds of things, but on student learning goals, may have more to do with improving student achievement than anything else that you do. It is your chief lever. Now that's not to say that there's other things that have impact here as well, but you really need to get that right. So I ask this question: what do you need from the superintendent for the board to be successful?
Open and honest communication.
Positive as well as negative feedback. To and from.
Pardon?
To and from. Willingness on the superintendent's part to accept negative as well as the board to receive negative from the superintendent. Back and forth, okay?
Oh,
Right?
He jumped ahead to the next half of the question.
Yeah.
oh.
Two-way communication, basically. Pretty hard when you only have two board members,
Yeah.
you know?
Hey, Dr. Spears, your turn. Again, none of this is your only opportunity. You get to talk about this more. You're setting the stage for it. What does the superintendent need from the board to be successful?
Clear communication. Timelines and goals for evaluation. And a solid meeting structure.
Solid?
Yeah, solid meeting structure that is consistent, that follows the parameters of the Brown Act. That's it.
Okay. So first scenario, board members don't agree. Is this okay?
Yes.
Actually, it's not just okay, it's needed. So, one of the things, I mentioned the Iowa Lighthouse study. One of the other things that came out of this study was this notion of a unified board versus a uniform board. Any thoughts on what the difference might be?
Unified, I mean, you're presenting yourself even if you disagree. You're presenting one body, meaning if I disagree with Richard in a board meeting or in closed session, I'm not going to go put him on blast or air out our dirty laundry. You know, I'm still going to support the board as a whole because we're supporting what we're doing as a whole with the school. And uniform, I'm thinking, is just, it comes to my head, is just structure. We're following the agenda. It's the same, where,
Uniform is basically you all think the same, so nothing ever changes. You don't close the gap there. What's the classic definition of insanity? Doing the same things over and over again, but expecting
It's a different result.
Yeah. And so the notion of a uniform board is that you all do the same, think the same, nothing changes. A unified board can have very robust discussion, very strong differences of opinion, and have that kind of discussion where you get the different ideas. But the difference is that once the decision has been made, you all come together at that point. You avoid the lingering animosity that can come from having differences of opinion. So, Harry, I don't know how to pronounce that name, said the best decisions are a product of disagreement and contest. And there was a study in Iceland that showed that people are more willing to accept a final decision that they didn't initially agree with if they believe that all points of view and perspectives were fairly considered. And so if they can find consensus around where to store spent nuclear fuel, I think that's a process we can use for some of our thornier issues as well. It's the idea that you want the robust discussion, you just don't want the lingering animosity afterwards. So disagreements before the vote build community confidence. Disagreements after the vote erode confidence. So I don't want to go too deep into the literature here but about the trustee versus delegate board, but we often see boards getting, this is a continuum, and on one end of the continuum is just a policy-oriented board. You know, we come to the meetings and all we do is policy or budget, and that's pretty much it. It's a hands-off kind of thing. On the other end, we have folks that come into the position likening their role to that of a congressperson. I'm here to do battle with the bureaucracy on behalf of my constituents. So what happens is in this one, what they found in the studies is this one is largely a reading board, whereas this one is largely a talking board. Now, my interpretation of this, now this is not the literature speaking, this is just the world according to Steve, not the first time you've heard that, is that a reading board is a learning board, a talking board is a convincing board. It's the idea that you already have your mind made up, now you're trying to get everybody else to support your notion. So there's some good and bad for both. On the trustee side, you do get high levels of trust among the members, but they are often considered a rubber stamp board. On the other end, you get high levels of community engagement, but it can lead to significant conflict, and that tends to create staff churn. So, Tom Alsbury, who has done a lot of the research that I shared in the first session, came to a group, did a presentation for a group of trainers in Portland, Oregon a couple years ago. And so we asked him, where on this continuum is the best place for board to be? And he said, generally speaking, it was his recommendation that they be 95% trustee and 5% delegate most of the time. He also acknowledged that there are times when this needs to slide over here. If you're going to do a boundary change, if you're going to close a school, if you're going to, some of the more contentious issues, you need to do more delegate approach and really go out of your way to get public input in all of that. Again, you're trying to harvest all perspectives, all points of view to make sure that everybody feels fairly heard in that. As a result, but most of the time you want to be down here. So as a result, you get the discussion, and the community feels heard, but mostly you have a stronger team in that, and this is a governance team. It's not just the board, it's not just the superintendent, it's both of those. So, any questions about that? Okay. So here's the protocol that I recommend. I'll let you digest that. Does it sound okay? Any questions or comments? Okay. So there is the notion of free speech. I get that. But, you know, Thomas Jefferson said rightful liberty is this unobstructed action, but within the limits of everybody else's rights. And so the idea when you're on the board, yes, you have freedom of speech, except you can't relate confidential information. It's unwise that you continue the conflict beyond the board. Again, conflict after the vote. So these three duties are in law for corporate boards and nonprofit boards. They're not in law for school boards or other government agencies. But in my view, they ought to be. Unfortunately, the governor doesn't call me very often to find out what I believe. That was meant to be humorous, but okay. Tough life.
I thought it was funny too.
So the duty of care is that you always try to do the right thing about the district. That makes sense. But you also agree to obey all of the laws and the policies and other agreements that the board has decided on. And in addition, you're loyal first to the district, not to the union, not to the PTA, not to the business, the Chamber of Commerce, not to the folks, we have, I'm assuming your district's not zoned. Are you elected at large?
Mhm.
Some districts are zoned, and honestly, I have, well, I shouldn't name names, and I won't. I've seen board members treat their zone like a political fiefdom. I'm about bringing the goodies to my little zone here. And so you see some districts where there have schools and have not schools in the same district. And it's primarily a function of board members who work to get good things only for their little slice. So, again, you can, it is free speech and you can do it, but just understand that when you do, there's a lot of things that come along with that, and clearly it is the students who ultimately pay the price. So what is the most likely thing to cause conflict among board members? Well, it's usually not what or even why. It's often about how. And this comes often from working styles, just the way we like to get things done. So this is the next exercise. It's on the right-hand side of your packet. And on the front page is 5 questions. And so what you want to do is read the question and then read the 4 answers underneath it. And the one that is most like you, put a 1 by that. The one that is least like you, put a 4. And put a 2 and 3. So rank the 4 things here for each of the questions. So when you're not done, you need to bring your numbers over to the next page. So,
So we added up total? No.
yeah, so what you do.
Oh, they're
one,
having,
two,
and then I
three,
added the
four.
rows, okay. Yeah, I just skipped ahead, so these are, the totals. I was doing it in my head.
So actually easier to do 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, 4. So what I would do is 2, 1, 3, 4, 2, 1, 3, 4. And then add up the columns. Got a calculator? So what's your lowest number?
Yeah, I have third time in one.
Okay.
I was pretty even Steven.
I have seen it where one person was equal in all 4 quadrants, but that's exceptional.
Mine was really
Which is your
close, yeah.
lowest? C? Dr. Spears, your lowest?
D.
B, as in boy? So, you guys are familiar with Myers-Briggs? Have you ever done any of the personality?
I did one of their service.
Pardon?
I did one of their service.
Well, Myers-Briggs is this really long, involved piece, kind of get to the same thing. The Keirsey sorter is a shorthand version of Myers-Briggs. This is a shorthand version of Keirsey sorter, but it's deadly accurate. My nose girl. So I think it is helpful to kind of get an idea of where folks are. So I've done this with really large groups, 70, 100 people in the room, and then we do it and we have them divide up to the 4 corners. And the first thing we ask them to do is to tell us, describe your group. And they're pretty complimentary in that first report. The next activity that we ask them to do is to describe everybody else. Well, they're not as complimentary when they do that. Here's the problem. We all tend to hang out in all of this stuff on a regular basis. It's in times of stress that we gravitate towards one corner or another. And while if I'm an amiable, I get along pretty well with the expressives and with the analytics. It is the diagonals that have the potential for conflict. If I'm an amiable, I want to check in. Are you okay? You got everything that you need? And have you had a chance to weigh in on this? And If I'm a driver, it's just get it done. So there's some tension there. If their motto is just get it done, the analytics motto is just get it done right.
Now.
And the expressives motto is break the rules. So you can see some tensions here as well.
Why do you take the lowest rather than the highest?
it's the way it's graded. It could have gone the other way. You know, if I'd have had you say, we asked you to say which one is most likely like you to be a 1. So in that case, if it's most like you, then it's the lowest number.
Okay.
So lower number meant more like you. So, as I said, we all hang out in the middle, and while Al here was a pretty analytic guy, even he had his expressive side. Values also tend to fall into the same sort of pattern here. And one of the things that we've noted is that people generally don't have different values. They have different value priorities. And my background is in community engagement. So I want, schools to be full of volunteers and community partners and all that stuff. And to really bring the whole community spirit within the district. But, we've had more than our share of school shootings, and there's a fair number of folks who just want to put strong walls up around and keep everybody out, keep our kids safe. So my priority tendency tends to be community involvement. Somebody else's priority may tend to be safety, and those can be at issue. Now, I'm in favor of safety. They're probably in favor of community engagement as well. It's just the priorities can come into conflict there. So what we recommend is recognizing this, and because they're rarely are single value problems, they're really multiple values at play most of the time, we seek the best rather than the right solution. So Risa, if you and I have a difference of opinion and the board votes 3 for your view and 2 for mine, I'm more able to come on board with your idea if it's considered the better idea, not the right idea. Because in that, then I'm judged wrong. And so it's more difficult for me to come on board.
Right.
Make sense? Okay, so next scenario, 3 members post comments on the local or any Facebook page. Is this okay?
No.
Pardon?
No.
Well, depends what the comments are about.
Well, yeah, let's say
I mean, if
they're
it's about a board meeting, no, it's not okay, no.
if they're about the district, or things that come in within your jurisdiction. Now, if they're about the high school football team,
Right.
no problem there. And this catches a number of folks up. They get that they can't all go to the same page and have a conversation, because that would be an illegal meeting. It isn't that the public gets to see your decisions, they get to see your deliberation toward decisions. But also, I don't know that the courts have weighed in on this yet, but our legal folks believe that even if you were to use 3 different Facebook pages or 3 different bulletin boards or whatever, weighing in on the same issue, that would be considered a serial meeting and illegal.
Well, because I could look up each one of theirs, technically. I mean, it's just a click.
But the problem is, you never really know whether somebody's posting on the same thing that you're posting on somewhere else.
I can guarantee I post on nothing, so we're good.
No.
I'm not the social media one.
Don't do it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good thing to go
Question
by.
about it, don't do it.
And I only bring this up because this comes as a surprise to a lot of board members. And Facebook and other social media pieces are a growing part of our lives. And the other, I worked with another board. I've only started using this particular piece within the last 3 or 4 months. And it came up because one district had a significant problem with this, and the problem was being fed by the community. Hey, how come you aren't chiming in on this issue? Don't you care?
Right.
And so they're posting stuff. Apparently our school board doesn't care about this issue. They never chime in on this. So fortunately, we do have somebody from the community here this time, but normally nobody from the community shows up to these sessions to know the right way to do things. And so they'll have expectations of you guys that aren't necessarily the right ones. And so I'm just forewarned, I guess, is forearmed. So these are your current policies. You have to recognize that even if you do make a statement, it may be just yours, but it can be perceived as reflecting the views or positions of the board. You have to be very clear that if you do make a statement, that it's just your personal view and not the view of the board. And then the other is you have to be careful that you're not facilitating a serial meeting. So this is a sample protocol. I would take Risa's approach here. Just don't do it. So. I also asked in the phone calls, do you have a board evaluation process in place? And the answer I generally heard was no, but this is a good idea. Well, actually your policies say this: the board of trustees shall annually conduct. And while I get you've got new members coming on, and so doing it right now won't be very effective, but in the last session I talked about building a governance handbook or a governance calendar. You should calendar. This is when we're going to do our annual self-evaluation. And if you need help with that, we stand ready to do that. We have an online tool. It's undergoing a change now. I rewrote it this last year to better reflect research. Currently it's a 58 question review. It's going to be pared down to 25 questions. Fewer questions and more pointed towards the actual research that underlines that. So, how well are we working together? Well, it's important to examine that because it does matter. Again, it's not just what you do, but how you do it. And you want everybody else in the district to get better. You should model the desire to get better yourselves. There is a fair amount of research. This is also a hand, don't bother trying to read this slide. There is a handout in your packet that lists 20 different board evaluation factors that had a correlation to student achievement. By the way, there's a coming article in, or maybe you've already received the latest CSBA magazine. There's an article in there that suggests that when you look at how boards have been responding to the evaluations, we've got some work to do. We're not performing at peak levels. Another research piece that just reinforces all of that. Next scenario. Is this okay?
I'm gonna go with no.
Pardon?
I'm gonna go with no. It goes back to.
I love those definitive answers. No?
It kind of goes back towards the unified board. I don't know,
Yeah.
it should be something that was maybe discussed amongst the other board members first, is
Well,
my gut instinct.
yeah, well, it seems like it ought to be, because it's talking about student achievement data, class size, that kind of thing. The worrisome piece here, an individual member directs the superintendent.
Not individual, no. As a board, at a board meeting, we could probably ask if she could do it, or the superintendent, he or she could possibly do this, so we might.
So your policy says that it's the board of trustees that is the unit of authority, and that an individual member has no authority. It's the idea that Dr. Spears has one boss. That one boss has 5 heads, not 5 different bosses. And so the policy goes on to say that individual members of the board shall not direct people, and really shall submit requests for information to the superintendent principal. Well, here's the sample protocol. If you're looking for something that's already been written, an existing report, that's a public document. And so that's not a special dispensation to anybody. Anybody can walk in and ask for a copy of an existing document. It's when it's the generation of reports that you need to take it to the board, so it's the board that is giving Dr. Spears direction, if it so chooses. However, having said all of that, here's the way I would approach this. I have an idea for doing something. I would go to Dr. Spears and let her know that I would like to bring this up at such and so meeting. I'm not directing you what to do, I'm giving you a heads up that the discussion is going to take place, so that she can come to the meeting prepared for that discussion, to let the board know how much work is going to be involved in this. So the idea of generation of reports submitted to the board for their consideration. And then the other is recognizing the concept of nice to know versus need to know. One of the first districts I worked with here in California, and I think I mentioned, I worked with the Oregon School Boards Association for 8 years. And so I came down and I'm working with this board, and the superintendent shared with me the most recent copy of her report back to the board. I explained this. Generally, the staff put together the packet. And this district's a little larger than yours, but it's not one of the larger districts in the state. So the board creates a packet, goes out to the board members review it, and then they send their questions into the superintendent, and then the superintendent and staff go back to answer all of those questions. What I got in this most recent report, 17 pages of single-spaced responses. There were more than 40 questions that were presented, I think it was 70 questions, and it took 40 hours of staff time to put it together. And as I looked at the questions, there were a few that were informing a governance decision, but most of them were fell in the nice to know, not need to know. So when you're looking for information, it really should be about things that are going to guide a governance decision, not just idle curiosity. The other thing is, be careful of some of the questions that you ask during the meetings, because they can inadvertently signal to the staff a change of importance. If you ask the same question 3 times at 3 different board meetings, I can guarantee you that the message to the staff is that, oh, this is the priority now. It doesn't matter whether the whole board asks the question. It can only mean, it only takes one board member to signal that shift. And it may not have been a shift. It just may have been curiosity. So, just urging caution here. And then the other is, I have been to meetings where I wasn't there as a trainer. I did search consulting. the first few years that I was with OSBA. And so I would sit through their regular meeting until it came time for my little tiny piece of this. And so I've heard lots of stuff. I do remember a meeting where they spent close to half an hour talking about which chocolate chip cookie recipe they should have used for the parent-teacher hoorah that they had. And I just talked with a county superintendent recently, and he was at a meeting where they spent, he said, 80% of the meeting time talking about whether to buy a Ford truck or a Chevy truck. Just saying. So good governance means no surprises. In that approach that I mentioned, is that I do go to Dr. Spears and let her know this is the conversation I'd like to have at the board. Again, it's not directing her what to do. And in some cases, she may be able to say, well, that's no problem. Here's the information you're looking for. Doesn't even need to go to the board. It's already done. But in some cases, it may be that she now has, she's aware of the upcoming conversation and should be better prepared to weigh in on it. So good governance is no surprises. I apologize for this video, and then after this discussion, we'll take a quick break. This is the one video that will likely make you mad.
Anthony and Autumn Nelson of Wharton have two of their kids in Riverdale schools in Hancock County. This is 6-year-old Ian, a kindergartner. In this surveillance video provided to us by the family, you can see Ian last Wednesday walking to the bathroom. When he comes out a short time later, his teacher, Barb Williams, confronts him. She grabs him and picks him up against the wall. Seconds later, she grabs him by the face and then by his shirt. His neck flops back as she picks him up off the floor. Ian's parents were furious. Williams learned Tuesday she's been suspended for 10 days.
Really?
So we live in a pretty viral society. How long after this airs would it be before people start corralling you in a grocery store or calling you? Or,
under a minute.
and what's their question?
What are you going to do about it?
What are you going to do about it? What's their other question?
Is she going to be fired?
10 days?
Right.
That's all?
That's the administrative absence pending termination.
Yeah, so this is the protocol that we recommend, that basically you want your superintendent to let you know on a regular basis what's going on. But in a crisis situation, and this isn't, you know, the level of the building burning down, but still it's, I would say, pretty near crisis stuff, because everybody in the world is going to be talking about it. So the superintendent will send out an alert and then attempt to reach members by telephone. Actually, the most, this is an older slide. The new slide says via telephone or text, and I'll insert that. So basically what she's going to tell you is this has happened, it's being dealt with. So when people come to you, you can say, I'm aware of it, it's being dealt with. And when they ask 10 days, that's all, you can say it's being dealt with. That's just the beginning. We don't know where it's going to go from here yet. And then just leave it at that.
Well, and I'm
most
sure
people-
in that instance, so it could have been, we're only getting the one snippet, it could have been a 10-day suspension pending, you know, a board meeting. I mean, the way things are set up, usually there's something, there's a
Criminal
process
investigation for
that
assault.
takes place that, you know, that's what I think the general public doesn't understand, is that there's a process that has to fully take place and see its way from point A to point B.
You're guided
Or-
by a contract that you have
Right.
with your staff, a licensed contract and a classified contract. So likely within that, the superintendent or even principal, I don't know how big this district was, had the authority to suspend somebody on the face of something.
Right.
And then it's investigated, it goes through the proper channels, and then there's some, I'm guessing that this person was terminated. I don't know for a fact what the final outcome was. It doesn't matter.
Facing civil charges and stuff.
But what you want to do is stay out of it. Because, now, one of the differences between the Oregon School Boards Association and the California School Boards Association, Oregon was basically a law firm. We handled litigation and we handled bargaining, we handled, I would say more than half of the audit office were lawyers. And one of the things they would routinely tell me as a trainer, make sure your boards understand not to get involved in personnel matters. Because if you do get involved in the wrong place, and we're going to talk about complaints about staff here in just a second, I've got another Andy tape, that it can cost, you put the district at potential for financial harm. It can cost the district money. They've had situations where a staff member could have been terminated outright because of some egregious action, but they wound up having to pay them $10,000 just to make them go away because a board member got involved at the wrong stage. So again, during crisis situations, superintendent lets you know, and then you can say, I'm aware of it, it's being handled. And then that's as far as it needs to go. So you haven't met Andy yet, but Andy is a fictional board member who really takes his job seriously, often in the wrong direction.
Yes,
Dr. Wilson, Andy Brand is here to see you.
thank you. Send him in, please.
Dr. Wilson,
Hey, Andy, what you doing up here today?
well, I have a pretty serious situation to discuss with you.
Well, let's hear it.
Clarence Hopgood talked to me last Sunday after Sunday school. He told me his daughter's bus driver is, well, he's a reckless driver. He's very concerned about his children's safety. Seemed pretty upset.
I wonder who the driver is.
Rusty Simpson.
Mr. Simpson. I'll call our transportation supervisor and ask him to investigate this situation right away.
That won't be necessary.
Why not?
I've already done it.
What do you mean?
Well, on Monday, I started my investigation. I followed the driver for 3 days and documented everything.
Didn't he have any idea you were following him around?
No, I was very careful. On Monday, I used my daughter's little import job to follow him. And then on Tuesday, I borrowed Lyle Selby's pickup truck. Wednesday, I used the church van to follow him. There's no way he suspected a thing.
Well, Andy, don't you really...
Now, in my investigation, I clocked that he was speeding 23 times. Yeah, 23. On Monday, he hit a curb so hard it knocked several of the children right out of their seats. Tuesday, he shot by the Curley house, even though he could see poor little Harold was chasing after the bus. It's all documented right there.
Wow.
I'll bet you wish you had more board members like me, huh? I take my responsibilities seriously.
Anybody notice anything that might have been problematic?
The whole thing.
I take my job seriously.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he's very self-righteous. I bet you wish you had more board members like me.
Yeah, be out of the job.
So, what's the problem here?
Well, he can take the complaint to the superintendent, and then it's the superintendent, we direct, it's the superintendent's job to then handle the rest of it. He was working outside of the scope of what he should be doing.
The problem is he's tainted his role as a member of the Court of Appeals, because that's what you guys are. You're the final arbiter within the district.
He's also put the district
It's,
in a position to be sued.
oh yeah.
Illegal and
So again, your board bylaw says individual members do not have the authority to resolve complaints, and you want the complainant to go to the superintendent or whoever the appropriate person is. You don't want to say, I understand your complaint, I'll let the superintendent know. Why not?
because you become part of the problem then, that,
Because you've just signaled to the person they don't need to be further involved.
yeah.
That it's now your responsibility to start the investigation, and in that process now, you're tainting your role as a member of the Court of Appeals. So, again, you have this Court of Appeals role, and this is policy 1312.1, which says, acknowledges that the board, in this complaint policy, the board may serve as an appeals body. So 1312.1 is a complaint against personnel. Anybody have any idea of how many complaint policies you have?
I'm cheating again.
Looking in the back of the book for the answers. There are 4 of
It's
them.
on the same page, it's hard not to.
Yeah, I get that. And it's not a problem. So the uniform complaint procedure is talking about adult ed, migrant ed, career and technical ed, special ed, discrimination, bullying, the LCAP. It's kind of the utility infielder. 1312.2 is instructional materials, both their content and use. 1312.4 is the Williams uniform complaint. And it's really about sufficiency of instruction materials, as well as clean and safe facilities. Well, and teacher vacancy or misassignment. So people, most of the policies you need to be aware of are the board bylaws, the 9000 series, but I would strongly suggest that you be very conversant with these 4 policies as well, because this is likely at some point somebody will be talking to their notion of something about moving right, and you should be aware of what the policies say. Now, in addition to that though, you want to be careful. It's okay to listen to complaints when it's about a policy, a procedure, facilities, those kinds of things. You want to be careful not to usurp the chain of command, but you do not want to listen to complaints against personnel. Now, the only exception to that is that if the complaint is against the superintendent, that should go to the chair of the board. So that's the only board
Which would be
member.
the board president.
Yeah, board president, sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
Board again. They're board chairs. I'm not quite climatized.
It's okay.
So that's the only case where a board member should be receiving a complaint. Is in that situation. And it shouldn't be all members of the board, it should be funneled through the president. Okay, so.
What actions then does the president take?
Pardon?
How is that handled? How is that?
It depends on what your policy says, and I didn't look
Okay.
to know what that policy says. It may also be outlined in Dr. Spear's contract, so, and I don't have access to that, so it would depend on what your agreed upon procedure is. And if you don't have a procedure, I would suggest that
You make one.
you discuss one, yeah. But if not, I wouldn't look just in policy. It may be something in Dr. Spear's contract as well. I don't know how often that's done.
What's that?
How that procedure, whether that procedure is put in contract or not.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, so actually it's almost 4:30. We've been here for an hour and a half. Let's take a 10-minute break, 5-minute break.
10 is fine, because you have to walk a long way from the bathroom.
Do you have a key when they give you the?
No, I think we should have a key, though, just the trustees.
Walk you over there so you can.
I'll walk with you.
I think you have to put that Porsche away and run away, I know that. It doesn't go through berms like this.
Actually, a couple more.
What do you heard on it?
Good morning, Mr. Dr. Wilson.
Good morning.
Well, good morning, Andy. What's on your mind?
I have a little situation to talk to you about. I got a phone call from my wife's best friend, Jill Johnson.
Well, let's hear it.
Well, her little girl, Betsy, has been assigned to Miss Robinson's class this year.
Okay.
Jill met with Miss Robinson the first day of school, and she was disappointed with what Miss Robinson has planned for the children this year. See, Betsy can already do the things she plans to teach. And to make matters worse, Miss Robinson's classroom had no decoration at all. No bulletin boards, nothing interesting hanging on the walls.
That doesn't sound like Mrs. Robinson.
So Jill goes to the principal and asks him to reassign Betsy. He refuses, so she asks if I could help.
I see.
So I went down to the school, and sure enough, Miss Robinson's room had nothing in it at all. All the other classrooms are colorful and bright.
There.
I can see why a parent wouldn't want their child in that room. So, can I tell Jill that you'll get Betsy moved?
I love his eyes. He said, oh, no, not again.
So, somewhat similar to the last one, Andy's kind of taking the bull by the horns and doing his own investigation. But what could possibly be the problem with board members just waltzing into a school to do evaluations?
Well, the thing is, we do that on a normal basis. I don't see anything wrong with the school board coming in and not on the basis that somebody told me something. It's just to see the environment of the school. And the kids are getting along well, and I'm not there to be judgmental. And we have avenues to go ahead and report directly to the supervisor what we observe, right? And if it's wrong, then but I think a board member should be allowed to come on the school grounds, right? But not to that extent, not to do an investigation. It's just to get a feel of what's going on.
Thoughts?
I mean, yeah, board members should be going on to the campus. I think so that their presence is seen, so that people know, A, they're involved and they care and they're doing their job. But to more or less feel out the climate, and just as a general observation, it's not our job to be an evaluator of the teachers.
So you both have it, right, and you do want to show the flag, so to speak. This was the only policy or bylaw that you had that spoke to this, and it was really more about being a volunteer, but it says that because the volunteer, because of your position as a board member, may inhibit performance of school personnel, board members should inform before volunteering. So why would it inhibit performance?
If they think they're being judged on what they're doing.
And that's it. If you want to freeze performance among staff, show up someday with a clipboard. And so, yes, you want to do visits, and so this is the protocol that we recommend, and for the purpose of being acquainted with what's going on, but you don't do it for the purpose of investigation. And really, you don't give directions or even make suggestions, because people will never take it as a suggestion.
No.
They will only take it as, well, this is the word of a board member, so I have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know exactly what practice you have here. Because you're a smaller district, things tend to be a little more informal in a smaller district, but I would still gravitate more towards the formal side of this and recommending that you, when you do want to come to a school site, that you let Dr. Spears know. And so she can say, oh, well, we've got something going on. It would be kind of a disruption if you came today. Can we do it whenever? Rather than just showing up as a surprise. Because when you show up as a surprise, I don't know Dr. Spears that well, but I'm guessing that she'll drop whatever she's doing and attend to you guys. Is that a fair reflection?
Absolutely. I'll bring them with me.
And so, you know, you may not have intended a disruption, but the result can be that. Now there's a difference when you have kids in school. I don't know if you have.
I had a granddaughter here.
Okay.
She's gone now.
And Risa, did you say? I can't remember.
I have a son currently here, and then next year I'll have my daughter will be here as
I
well.
thought so. So it's a little different dynamic, but not much, because your teachers will never see you
Right.
as a parent. They will always see you with the board hat on. And so this should not prevent you from being engaged in your son and your daughter's education and all of that. Just understand that the dynamic is going to be a little different for you than it is for the other parents. So I wouldn't say, whatever practice you put together, I wouldn't say that if you're coming here as a parent, that you need to let Dr. Spears know, but you may want that. I don't know. So that would be worthy of a discussion, you know, what's going to work here. So.
Or just, is it written anywhere about, just in case if we're asked, because we do have some board members that are parents who haven't had any issues, but what to be involved in like PTA or JSCEA, but we have it, can they be involved in those things because they have a child here? Can they be involved in coaching and all the aspects that we have parents involved in? Or is that different?
Well, if your coaches are paid, they can't do that.
They can't receive pay.
They can't receive pay. They cannot be an employee of the
Can
district.
they do it and opt out of the pay portion of it?
As a volunteer, it's a bit problematic. It's not to say that it can't be done, just have to understand the problems attendant to volunteers serving as, or board members serving as volunteers, whether it's as a coach or classroom aide or whatever. Volunteers are unpaid staff, supervised by a staff member, who is supervised by the superintendent, who is supervised by you. It's an uneasy cycle, and because of that, the people that supervise the volunteers are more likely to let a board member get away with something or not criticizing their work because of that dynamic. And so it also signals, it can be a dangerous signal to other volunteers. Oh, well, we can do this. When it was just a board member kind of taking on more than they probably should have.
Yeah, and that was actually a question I had asked Dr. Spears because I wanted to volunteer and do some stuff with like, it's not called PTA here, but you know, donate my time, you know, if there's a pie sale, or there's always looking for volunteers, especially in the middle of the day, but I didn't want to cross over anything that would be inappropriate.
Volunteering for PTA or PTO, whatever the name is different than volunteering for the district.
So in that manner...
Because that you're not an unpaid staff member in that role.
Okay.
You're a community member in support of the district. Now, PTA still has a relationship with the district, same as a booster club
Right.
would have a relationship with the district. But it's not a supervisory thing, it's a partnership piece. So that would be a little cleaner role than a classroom aide would be. It's not to say that you can't do it as a classroom aide or a coach, you have to understand
What comes with it.
all the pieces. It can get complicated. And it, again, I go back to we're emotional animals, and you just never know how some people are going to interpret things emotionally. Was that waffle enough for you guys?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, really.
Thank you.
I get it.
So this is the last Andy tape.
Andy, glad I ran into you. Hey, want to know what's going on with the school board? Has the entire board gone nuts?
I'd be surprised if we have. Why would you say that, or is that just your way of supporting your local school board?
You know very well what I'm talking about. How can the school board stand by and let Hank Fisher be suspended without giving him a reason why? Everybody knows he keeps the high school students in line, no drugs, no alcohol. Who won't find another principal like him?
Hey, nobody hates us more than I do. And the entire board sees it the same way.
Well, if that's the case, then let's put him back on his job and move on. The community's in an uproar. Nobody knows what's going on, or even why Hank's been suspended. Not even Hank.
Oh, Hank knows why he was suspended.
He said he didn't. How do you know he does?
Because we discussed it in closed executive session.
Oh, so why was he suspended?
We're not supposed to talk about it outside of a closed session, okay? But there is a good reason for his suspension.
Well, I can't see any reason to let a man like Hank go.
He was accused of sexual harassment by 3 teachers. Hey, don't tell anybody you heard that from me.
You know I won't tell anyone.
Oh, absolutely no chance of that. So do you have a policy on confidentiality? Well, actually you have a state law on confidentiality. And so what might be the board member's liability in this? He's broken confidentiality.
He could be sued.
Be sued by the principal.
So can be sued for invasion of privacy and slander, and can be referred to the grand jury. This is against the law. I don't know that anybody's done jail time because of it, but I don't think you want to go down that path.
I don't want to be the first. Set the standard.
And the other thing to note here is that Andy is acting outside the scope of his duties. So if he is sued, any compensation or fine or any of that comes out of his personal pocket. He is not covered by the district's insurance. You guys have officers and directors insurance, right? Dr. Spears?
I don't know.
I'm guessing that every district in the state has this.
I would have to check.
In the normal course of your duties, you guys are typically covered by officers and directors insurance. So that, let's say you have a TAG program, no, it's called GATE program here, right? Gifted and talented, not talented and gifted. Sorry, slowly getting there. Let's say you have a GATE program and the board decides for financial reasons to do away with it. And somebody brings a suit saying, well, thank you very much, now my child can't get into an Ivy League school because they don't have this on their resume. In that particular case, you are covered because that was a reasonable board action and is within the scope of your duties. What he did was against the law and outside the scope of his duties, so he's not covered by insurance. We had a case in Oregon, not on the school board, but within our county government. we had a couple of commissioners who wanted to hire aides, but they knew it was going to be a problematic thing. So between the two of them, they said, well, I'll go talk to that commissioner and you go talk to those two individually, so that at no time will we ever have 3 people. But what they did was a serial series of meetings on this thing, and somebody found out about it, took them to court. The first judgment was $200,000 split between the two. It was eventually settled out of court, and so we don't officially know what the number is, but I have it on good authority that each of those guys had to pony up $20,000 out of their own pocket because they weren't covered by their insurance. So you're not at risk if you don't do it the wrong way, if you do everything the right way. This scenario is also a little unique because it talks about something that's unfair to board members. What was unfair about this?
Put us in one class.
Pardon?
Put us in one class, a board, and we talk about a lot of stuff.
No.
I'm trying to figure out what Andy's role was.
Well, yeah, he was talking to a community member, somebody he knew at work.
Oh, okay.
And so Andy's role was a board member, but he was so in this scenario, Hank, the guy who was suspended, got to lie.
Right. Yeah.
He said, that he didn't know why he was suspended. Yet Andy said, well, of course he knows. It was discussed. Here's the problem. I know of 3 board members in California who were recalled because they weren't allowed to discuss confidential information, and the community had it wrong. The community understood something that was going on in the district a certain way, and the 3 board members couldn't defend themselves because it was a confidential matter. They were recalled as a result. It's unfair, I get it, but that's why you guys are paid the big bucks.
Right. I want a raise.
So you're going to have at least 1 new board member, right?
Yeah.
Possibly more.
Yes.
So, onboarding folks, people have started to pay more attention to this because it's being done somewhat haphazardly. Now, CSBA does have a new board member institute. We have a new board member gathering at our annual education conference. We do other things trying to help folks. But within the district, often, well, here's our policy manual. Here's the license contract. Here's the classified contract. Here's the superintendent's contract. Here's our budget. Here's our LCAP. You look at this list of stuff, our facilities plan, technology plan, all of our minutes, pretty soon you got a stack of paper this high. So, because I'm a bit of a research wonk, I do look at a lot of research. This particular study was working with engineers, so very detailed kind of guys and women. And what they found was that as they piled on the information, the engineers started making mistakes, lots of mistakes. And basically, what they say is that overload, information overload, basically makes people stupid. I mean, the brain region responsible for smart decision making just goes on vacation. So you want to be careful about how you bring folks on. And the other is, because you come from such a wide range of background, it's not unusual to have board members who were former teachers or other folks, and so have a fair amount of information about the district already. So it's going to be different for each person. And your board bylaw says that, yes, you will bring them up to speed, but in your packet is a couple of things. One is this thing about what every board member needs to know. It kind of lists it all. But also I'm giving you an advance copy. This is a draft of an article that will appear in the next CSBA magazine. And it's just advice written by myself, Luann Rivera, and Deb Dudley, the three consultants within CSBA on onboarding, how to bring people up to speed. And the other is to give them some idea that it takes time. In fact, NSBA, the National School Board Association, said it takes, on average, about 2 years for people to come up to speed. So, this one won't make you mad, but it's difficult to listen to.
I think you've asked that same question now.
Excuse me, Mr.
No, excuse, this is our meeting, Ms. Sutton.
I understand, but I'm a constituent. I'm
we
finishing
invite
my
you to
question.
the microphone to address the board, but what I wanted to let you know is you've asked the same question 3 or 4 times, and we do not engage in questions and answers after the meeting. So, unless it's, ma'am,
Pamela Martin Diaz,
ma'am, I'm going to have to ask the officer to, ma'am,
as a constituent.
I'm going to make one more attempt.
Maybe please answer the question, Mr. Giaquino. Why would you not allow that?
Ma'am,
I know that we're living in America,
I'm going to make one
the
last
land of the
attempt.
free and freedom of speech.
Sorry. It is difficult to listen to, right?
Yeah.
So imagine being in that audience with that going on. Everybody in the room is going to be uncomfortable. But no, they weren't yelling at one another. They were just talking over one another. And he had basically the same policy you guys have.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
She didn't understand it.
Right.
She said, well, I thought this was America.
Yeah.
Why aren't you answering this question? Well, our practice is we don't. This is a meeting in public, not with the public. And so I'm going to talk about some fine-tuning, how you could resolve that. But first I wanted to talk about this. Now, you heard him say call for the officer to remove her.
Mm-hmm.
This is not the same case as that. That was somewhere in the Midwest, and I don't remember exactly where. This is a case from here in the state, in California, that where somebody was removed from the board meeting. The key that what the court found was that the board didn't prevent speech due to the viewpoint. It was just that they were being disruptive. And in this particular case, that person was being disruptive. Now, in this particular court case, now you got to know I'm not an attorney here, so I'm just not giving you legal advice. Just reporting what's others have done. So the court found that the board cannot censor public speech that includes criticism of an employee. And your card says the following speech will not be allowed: slander, defamation, profanity, personal attacks, or revelations of private data. Actually, you can't say that. They can make whatever comments they want to make. This is not accurate. This card is not accurate.
And in my experience, we have not followed the card. I'm not familiar with that card.
I brought that there.
Okay.
No one uses it, and I was asked to remove it, so I removed it.
Well, I'd make this a discussion piece at your board meeting. Hey, you guys need to know what this is, because this is how the public interacts at your meetings, and so you need to know the full contents. You need to discuss them.
Well, and that's part of the problem is I think a lot of these are old things that have been adopted, and all of the board members, except for one, have all come on and within the past 2 years. We're all new, so there's things like that we have
No, I
Oh, okay.
typed that up due to lack of structure. I typed that up. and
Okay,
then
I just picked it up at the
Oh,
last
okay.
meeting, so that's,
And I trashed them because we don't follow it, number one. People still engage in the meeting, but I believe it should be some structure followed. That was the reason that I typed that up, but
So-
it's wrong, so good thing it is done.
so Mark wasn't a big fan of meetings. Wasn't a big fan of school boards either, but I'll let you look up that quote for yourselves. The president is the key, and so basically the idea that the president lets the minority have their say, but the majority gets their way. And it's the idea that the president is there to ensure that we have the proper attention to our agenda and that there's fairness about the meeting. So the protocols that I recommend, again, the statement that it's a meeting in public, not with the public. And because of that, debate should only happen between board members. You should never get into a debate with somebody from the audience. And nor should you respond to questions or statements made by them. They are there to tell you what's on their mind or provide their information. They're not there to get, they get your perspective by sitting down and listening to you guys talk among yourselves. That's how they get to understand the answers to the questions that they might ask. If they have other questions, they can go to the superintendent after the meeting. Now, if I was the board chair, the way I would do that is I would say, I'm going to call for a 5-minute recess. And I would walk over to the person at the podium and I would say, the reason that we don't answer your question is that we don't answer questions. We're here to listen to you, not to have dialogue with folks. It's contrary to good board practice. So you're welcome to sit and do it. Anyway, I would have diffused the situation that way rather than calling an officer and having her escorted off the premises. Now, sometimes that doesn't work, and so you may need to call an officer to have the person escorted if they're still about, no, I'm going to have this done. But it's a way to kind of calm the meeting because you guys were made uncomfortable. Everybody in that room was uncomfortable. You want to get things back on a calm and even, and that is something that I recommend that a president be allowed to do in a given situation.
Does it have to be in the policy, or can that just be something that's...
Yeah, I'm going to give you a protocol
Okay.
here that is, but more than that, it's not just the president. A board member can say, I'd like to move for a 5-minute recess. And then you can take the recess and accomplish the same thing. So if the president isn't taking the cue to do the right thing, any of the members of the board can call for that. So, and then if there's a need to respond to somebody in the meeting, it should be only the president. This says chair, but it should be president. And I'll change that. So this is one of the things that I do recommend that you adopt. In addition to this, that you probably want to take number 8 off of here.
Everything else is okay?
Everything else looks okay to me. But then the president should read some statement, that we're going to invite public comment, and then include this statement. And basically you're saying that, we welcome this, but this is the bottom part that has the real punch here. Basically, you're letting them know that, okay, you can do slander, You can do, I would stop it, I would consider profanity disruption.
Yes.
You can stop that. But you can't stop slander, defamation, or if it's if it gets into a personal attack, I would strongly recommend the recess piece. But some folks believe that this is their vehicle to say, hey, and so they really don't understand what the appropriate process is, because they don't come to these trainings to find out the right way. So any other comments, concerns about?
Are there boards that don't have a card, with something on it? The rural districts and urban districts, at least this is the only rural one I've been in, so I'm not sure. But I know in the larger districts, we always had some type of card. I worked in a number of them. We always had some type of card, a speaker card. So that was the reason that I typed up a speaker card.
And they sign in in order to speak.
And they have a sign-in sheet, but in this community, it's like taboo. People were like, why do you have the card? Let's get rid of it. And no one wants to sign in, and there's no list of speakers. Normally, if there's a stack, there's someone on the board or in a part of personnel would order them and they would say speaker number 1, and they call your name and you come, and they're clocking it.
Yeah, I get in a smaller community.
So I'm like, okay, I thought that's what we're supposed to have. So I made the card, and now it's like, don't have it. Is that like, I'm like, I don't know where the place is.
I would recommend that you have it, but I recommend that it is the board who discusses it and adopts it as the appropriate way to do things. And I get that in a smaller district, there's a certain informality that can occur. Trust me, I have worked with a board who outnumbered the staff. The district was that small. Going to their first meeting, it was like, I could tell who the chair was, because that was the person who had the gavel. But deciphering, if I hadn't been introduced to them beforehand, I wouldn't have known, because they sat anywhere in the room. The room was filled with public folks. They had a very strong community engagement approach. It was more like a town hall meeting, and that worked for them most of the time. But when the wheels fell off, they really fell off. And it was hard to get back to a structured setting because everybody was used to chiming in whenever they felt like it. And while that can work most of the time, it's really not good because of those times where things get problematic. You need to, my recommendation is that you do have a certain formality to the board.
Well, doesn't our president do a disclaimer before the public comes up and speaks? I thought doesn't she read something off there?
On that, but it's not the detail like that.
He says, like, we invite the members of the public to come out to speak. However, you can only speak for 2 minutes. It's just a generalized, and then only 30 minutes per one topic. I believe
it's just a little
very,
italicized.
It just says general public comment. The board may limit comments to no more than 3 minutes to each speaker and a maximum of 20 minutes to each subject. So I got it 3 minutes.
So what you're saying is we should do this card also?
Well, you don't need to read the card, but you should have the card there to explain to folks.
Set out there so they pre-read it.
So they read this and understand the thing, and that this then is their sign-in piece. So basically
we keep it as a record. I was asked to remove that.
Well, the thing is, in the environment that 90% of the people that come to the board meetings are skeptical. They don't like to put their signature on anything because they're peace officers, most of them out here at the prison, and they won't sign anything. Okay, that's why that's the environment we're in. So
they're a peace officer?
Yeah, they're prison guards.
So that's why they don't want to
Oh,
sign?
no, they're really, trust me, they don't sign anything.
I have worked in a secure
Well,
environment for a bunch of years. I was at the state hospital for 12 and a half
I worked
years.
with the prison system for 25 years. And I know
As
these
staff,
guys.
by the way.
Yeah.
It's an important distinction.
Yeah.
State psychiatric facility?
No, it's the mental, the mindset that they're in, okay? You can't tell me what to do. Right? That's their mindset, okay? I have a union, okay? I've dealt with them for 25 years, so.
But actually you can.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
it's
if
up
they
to
don't
you.
sign
Now,
it, they don't sign it, they don't speak, right?
One of the things I would recommend is you have the card and then you have a sign-in
We
sheet.
do,
And
We
they're
have
two
a sign-in
different
sheet.
things.
Yeah.
we do.
So that,
Well,
otherwise,
I was told
if
to
they're,
remove that,
if
so
they're, if they're signing in here and then they turn it in, they've given up the card and now they're not reading what they're supposed to understand. I'd let them keep the
Card
card.
and sign it on the sheet. Well, and that might be less intimidating
Yeah.
too.
So,
And so where would be the appropriate place to discuss the card with the board? That has to be an item on the agenda?
so I'm gonna be sending you a protocol, a governance handbook with a bunch of protocols. You can insert that as part of the discussion, as an attachment to all of that. So, this is about half of what 9121 says that the president shall be responsible for. But again, basically, making sure that everything just stays on track. So, and again, this was the thing I was recommending earlier, that you can call a recess at any time. Okay, all in favor of Jim, at least until we can do better. Normally, the person is in the room when I give this. And I understand you probably have a new vote here this next month, right? Or maybe you'll continue on with him. You guys have your organizational meeting in
He's the
December.
interim right now for president.
Yeah,
right?
interim.
He was the vice president.
Yeah, in December.
So we're running ahead of schedule, so you're going to be able to leave early.
That's good.
I made you watch a movie or a video that would make you mad. This one I think will make you happy. I like to end on positive notes.
Sure.
And so for a while I used a video that was very uplifting, and in fact it was very emotional. It often made people cry, but it was sports. And I thought, I kept looking for something that was more academic, and I finally found this one. This young man is delivering the salutatorian address to his 2010 graduating class. Oops. Yeah, I'll come back to that.
Out of all the students, Eric Duquette may have once been the least likely to speak on graduation day.
It is with great humility and pride that I stand before you as your salutatorian. I started my academic career being diagnosed with a serious learning disability, autism. My parents were told that my prognosis was poor and that I would probably end up in an institution. They thought differently. Today I stand before you, accepted into every institution of higher learning that I apply to. So I guess in a way the experts are right about the institution thing. I want to thank all of my wonderful classmates who went out of their way to always make me feel wanted. All of my wonderful teachers, you made me want to come to school each day. I hope I made you all proud. I want to thank my mother and father for teaching me that in life it is all about the choices we all make. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for the choices you made, believing in me and not giving up. I truly love you. Never underestimate the power of a smile. Do not allow yourself or others to be defined by your limitations, but rather abilities. Never underestimate yourself. Congratulations, class of 2010. Enjoy tonight, for it will soon just be a memory. Thank you.
Make you feel good?
Yeah.
Why? You don't know this kid.
Hope. Endurance.
That somebody cared about him. He was
That
not
he
lost.
achieved.
He's never said you cannot succeed.
Yeah, he was never lost in the crowd.
We're an amazing species in that we take joy from the success of others, particularly kids who've overcome significant obstacles. And so, just as it made you feel good, if you put your kids forward and let other people see their growth and development, it will make them feel good, and as it turns out, it's good for the kids too. Did I share with you the story about Powers, Oregon last time?
Mm-hmm.
I did. Well, you'll have to
I think
come to another thing. So it's kind of on that same line. It's the idea of letting your kids showcase, and really, if you want to build community confidence, that's a great way to do it.
Sure. Plus, it adds credibility to the teaching environment of the school. They actually showed that they did care.
So I'm going to go back to this real quickly. So I presented a number of sample protocols, and I will send them to you in handbook form. But the thing I want to point out is that the easiest thing in the world is to create them. It's a little more challenging to remember them and abide by them. It is most difficult to institutionalize them. And by that I mean that I can remind you of what our protocol is without fear of tarnishing our relationship. And that's a difficult stage to get to, because in that act, I'm implying that you weren't doing things the right way.
Right.
But it is our agreement that we were going to do it this way. So it can take a bit of trust development over time to get to that point. But it is the critical stage here. Now, Socrates was arguably a pretty bright guy. But when he said this, I think he had it wrong. Because if knowing the right thing was all it took, I'd be a lot thinner. So, the takeaways that I hope you have tonight, again, it's not just what you do, but how you do it that matters, and you do have an impact on student achievement. To ask, do we have a policy or a bylaw on this, to be guided by those rules that you've already set in place? Now, if you're like most boards, you read the bylaws when you first came on board and you haven't reviewed them since, except maybe to reauthorize them or to revise them in some fashion. Knowing all of your policies, if they were printed out, they're probably a book about this thick. Okay, that ain't happening. But the board bylaws are about this thick. It would take you about a half an hour to reread them. I recommend that you do that as an annual part of your organization meeting. You don't have to do it during the meeting, but it's an agreement that you guys will come to that meeting having reread the 9,000 series.
When is the organizational meeting typically, would you say typically held just at the beginning of the year? Is it a special meeting?
Yeah.
Like December, or are you talking beginning of the school year?
Different boards do things differently, but I would say most boards in the state do things in December, because that's when you're seating your new members, that's when you're electing your officers.
Right, okay.
And likely, I didn't look, but likely you have a board bylaw that says that's
Right.
when you do it.
So I know we do a lot of the, like you said, the organizational stuff. And it's just because we haven't done, like you said, the map or the calendar, just because ours hasn't looked like that prior to, which.
We have one. We have one that I created on a long sheet when I got here, but you actually have one before I got here too, on a small monthly, but it's never been a part of giving it to you. So someone has always, well, I don't know always, but they tracked it the year before, and then I put it in the monthly by all of the agenda categories. I took, and so we do have that, so we can bring that to you. He advised that we give that to you,
So
you all.
The approach that I would recommend, go get yourself a 12-foot
Yeah,
piece of
that's what you
paper
were saying before.
and then mark it off by month, and then use the sticky paper that's about this size, and then write decisions that the board needs to make and reports that are going to be made on certain topics. And then put them up along the map. And then, I shared last time, one of the boards that I was working with developing this, as they looked at all of this, they realized we don't are in July. Then you got to take those things and write them down. October is just overloaded with stuff. We need to rearrange.
Type of one that you can, Tanya work, I had paper, and I put the old things in things, and then she, with her, what was her first task, maybe was to make it fit on a Lego sheet, so we have that, so I can bring that to the board.
So you just want to schedule out things, and so it's clear
What's missing.
what you're looking for. Understanding your Court of Appeals role. So I asked this question at the last one. Let me ask it again. I've already pre-populated this with one thing. Again, I'm going to send you